Hello, I am Zainab, and today I am joined once again by Roja, and we are research executives at Gallup, Pakistan. Today, we will be continuing our discussion on the Pakistan Demographic and Health Survey 2017 to 18. The topic that we'll be discussing today is marriage decision-making autonomy as reported by women in the survey. Overall, if we look at the key statistics, we see that women who were married in their 20s reported greater autonomy in choosing their husbands. So around 8 and 10, 20 to 24 year olds, and also 25 to 29-year-olds said that they had a greater say in choosing their husbands. Similarly, uh, having a say in choosing their husbands was less common amongst women who were underage or younger than 18 in some provinces when they first got married. Similarly, we do see that education level has a positive relationship with having a say in your marriage, where women who had higher education at the time of the survey reported that they had a greater say in when they got and who they got married to. Also, with wealth, we'll see later that there's a bit of a mixed relationship, but comparing the lowest and the highest wealth quintiles, we see that women who are from richer families, who are wealthier, do have a greater say in who they get married to. In provinces, we see that KPK and Punjab have the largest proportion of women who say that they had a higher say, or they had a say in who they got married to or in their marriage, whereas Sindh, and then in the last place we have Balochistan, where lesser women reported having a say in who they got married to. But still, it's good to see that there is, like, generally there more than 70%, except for Balochistan, we see that women have a say in their marriage. And there's also one caveat that I think is important to note when we begin this discussion, is that these are self-reported measures. These are women who were asked if they had a say in their marriage, and they said yes, they did. So I would be a bit hesitant to consider that there was no self-reporting bias here. But again, we'll just take these values and numbers at face value and then take it from there. So first, we'll be looking at women who reported greater autonomy in choosing their husbands. Now, in the first section, these are women, and their ages are the ages at which they are being interviewed. So a lot of 20-year-olds and 24-year-olds who were interviewed said that they had greater say in choosing their husbands, so around 83%. And the lowest were women who were aged 40 at the time of the interview, 40 to 44 year old. They said that around 77% of them said that they had a say in choosing their husbands. Again, it's good to see that um all of these age groups, the women having autonomy is still higher than 75% throughout, but still it's younger women who said that they had a greater say in choosing their husbands.
And I think that we can kind of um, comprehend a historical trend throughout as well, because women who are married, who are now 42, 44 years old, 20 years ago they would have been in the 20-year bracket. And if they at the time did not have as much autonomy, suppose 76.8% had their autonomy or a say in who they married, we can infer that there has been significant increase in the percentage of women who do have greater say in who they're marrying to.
Yeah, I think it's safe to derive this meaning from this graph. And you're absolutely right, because since we just have data from 2017, we can take this graph and these numbers as, a throwback to when these 40-year women were 20, and compared to the 20-year-olds now. Second, Joe, the category that we have is the percentage of women who had a say in choosing their husband, but here we're looking at by age at first marriage. So it gives us a more direct relationship. And as one would expect, I feel like that the younger the woman is, there are lesser younger women who say that they had a higher say or they had autonomy choosing their husbands compared to women at older ages. And I think one factor that we'll also later look at in detail could be education, because I'm just assuming that, women who are getting married at older ages, one reason for that could be them attaining education. And as we'll see later, that with education also comes, in a lot of cases, greater autonomy and awareness too.
Definitely. And like the previous statistics that we saw, that women between the ages of 15 to 19 reported that 79.6% of them had a say in their marriage. We can see that when they were married and they were under the age of 15 or of the age of 15, the percentage was less than 73%. So there is definitely that distinct difference as well when we compare from a national average or an average within a group of age. There is
Yeah,
definitely the positive trend that we can see here, with the exception of the 22 to 23 year being reported.
yeah, definitely. If we move next, again, like previously, we talked about education levels, and here also we see even greater of a direct relationship where, as women, increase, their education level increases, so does their autonomy. With women having higher education, more than 92% of them said that they had autonomy in choosing their husbands. And I feel like it is also uh, a nature versus nurture thing, because sure, these women in themselves as individuals do have greater awareness and greater education, but then also I would be assuming that a lot of them would be coming from educated and more financially able households for them to have actually gotten to the point where they have that higher education. So I feel like both of these factors also play in, because it's more likely that women with no education would be coming from households where maybe women getting educated is not very encouraged, or they can't afford it. And with that, you can tie in cultural aspects of that as well. But we do see a very direct trend when we look at education level and marriage autonomy.
Another thing that this data makes me think about, which the data doesn't reflect, but I feel in my personal experience is possible, is that when you do attain more education, you also have that kind of exposure to a greater number of people, which includes people of the opposite gender. So that exposure also has some element into, your marriage by choice to people. So I think that's also a possibility with the attainment of education.
Yeah, definitely. And to add to what you just said, higher education means you're going out of the house more, you're interacting with a lot more people from diverse backgrounds, from diverse professions. And I'm assuming that if you have higher education, it's more likely that you will also be a part of the workforce. And that, again, just lends greater autonomy to the women as well. Next, if we look at wealth, we see that there is sort of a direct relationship, but not as pronounced as education. So we can infer that, even wealthier women, they sure, like, they might have greater autonomy, but more of it has to do with education than wealth. But if we look at wealth purely, we see that, again, women in the lowest quintile have lesser women in the lowest quintile have greater autonomy in choosing their husbands compared to the 89% in the highest wealth quintile. What stands out to me is that fourth wealth quintile, which is lower than the middle and the highest wealth quintile, where only around 82% of women say that they have autonomy. But again, we can write it off to statistical or sampling biases, because the difference isn't as great. But that is something I would like to see more detailed introspection into.
I think when we compare the no education level to the highest education level, there is an increase in autonomy of roughly 18%. And likewise, in the percentage of women who had a say in choosing their husband on a scale of wealth quintile, there's a roughly 18% increase as well. So I'd say that there are comparable results, but because of the anomaly of the fourth quintile, we can't really form a distinct trend across quintiles.
Yeah, definitely. Like for sure, the two extremes of the no education and the high education, and then the lowest quintile and the highest quintile, they are comparable, and that I think also lends again to the argument that it is possibly women who are wealthier or in higher wealth quintiles who are able to get higher education. So we can see that having a relationship as well. But again, these are not statistical relationships. These are just relationships that we are inferring from the data that we have. And I would love to see more statistical analysis to, look at the causal factors that lead women to have greater autonomy. Because, but I do see that, just the fact that there is, again, more than 70%, 75% in most cases, women who claim that they had a say in choosing their husbands. And so that is for sure a positive sign. But then there's also like a lot we have to go forwards and upwards, because ideally that should be 100% in a very ideal world. Next, if we look at region-wise data, we see that something that struck me was that more women in rural areas reported having an input and more autonomy in choosing their spouses than those in urban areas. I think one factor for that might be the tighter knit communities in rural areas, and how, everyone knows everyone. And because also, if we look at agricultural setups, we do see that women are a part of the workforce there as well. Sure, it's more subsistence work, it's more informal work, but they are contributing to the finances of the household in some shape or form. And I think that might be a factor that is playing in here. If we look at provinces, we see that KPK and Punjab have the highest proportion of women who are saying that, they had a say in choosing their husband, while Sindh and Balochistan have lower percentages, with Balochistan having the lowest.
The variation between Balochistan, which is the lowest reported number, and then KP is quite drastic to me, and I believe this is the greatest variation we've seen across the different kind of associations that we build, be it wealth quintile, be it education or age. It's nearly 20%, in fact, 22%
Yeah.
almost. So that
Yeah,
is slightly higher,
it
but
is concerning for sure. And I would like to see within Balochistan the rural urban breakup of how women have autonomy in their marriages. But also I feel like the sample sizes can also be considered, and sampling should also be noted here. Because again, population wise, we do see that Punjab is the most densely populated, and I feel like that might also be a factor. But I would definitely love to see more into, especially in the provinces. Across all the other categories, the differences have not been very great, but in the provinces, and the provinces are also something that we can influence from a policy perspective, right? So like, um education level and wealth level and autonomy there is more of a cultural thing that needs to be affected or impacted over time. But I feel like within provinces, there can be maybe legislation or campaigns targeted towards specific segments where women have the least autonomy in choosing who they marry. And I feel like that could get us quicker results in a shorter number of time compared to targeting other demographic variables.
so Zainab, I think another thing that we should keep in mind while looking at this data is, okay, as statisticians and analysts, we are aware of the fact that a smaller sample size means a higher margin of error. And when we see populations of Punjab, Sindh, KB, and Balochistan as a proportion of Pakistan, the population for Punjab and Sindh account for much higher percentage of the national population compared to KP and Balochistan, which means the sample sizes for KP and Balochistan would be lower, and the margin of error for these samples would also be higher. So there is possibility of that data being more varied compared to the on ground realities, which is why we have to note or take into account all of these things when we are looking at data, because it's not just numbers.
Yeah, definitely. You raise a very good point, and which is why rigorous statistical analysis is also very important before we come to any conclusions, and any causal relationships, because it's, just looking at raw numbers can sure give you a general idea, like our graph here has given us. But again, that is all that is a general idea of what the trends may look like. But then again, unless you actually delve deeper into the other factors, or maybe like a study of just women in Balochistan and how autonomous they are could, or in Sindh could give us more practical insights into how we can contribute from a legislative point of view to increase women autonomy and who they get married to, or who their spouses are. I think that is the end of our press release review here. Thank you, Roja, for joining me on this discussion. You raised some very good points, and I hope to have similar discussions with you about PDHS on different topics in the future as well.